Uh, Harriet, one of the things that you said last week when we met that I just loved was that every brand is a purpose-driven brand. And as CMO myself, I was like, yeah, because if you don't stand for anything, you don't really have much of a brand. But over the course of your career, you've worked with some of the world's strongest brands like MTV, ESPN, Oprah Winfrey. It really doesn't get stronger or better than that, right? So when you
Yeah, no,
first
go ahead. Go ahead with
I
your
was
question. Sorry.
when you first get in, like, how do you get started? You know, some of them may have a purpose already. How have you dug in and helped define the purpose?
I think as we've talked about a little bit during the course of our initial conversation, purpose, I think, really comes from the relationship you have with your viewer, audience, consumer, customer. And, to me, I have always been lucky enough to be involved in companies that have a very strong emotional relationship with their consumer. And, I think that is first and foremost, any purpose-driven company or any company's purpose is to build that emotional connection. And out of that emotional connection, you understand what it is your consumer wants from you, what it is your consumer perceives in you, and how to continue to build the positive and deeper parts of the relationship between your brand and your consumer. So I would say the most important thing that you can do in building a brand or a purpose-driven brand or going from one brand to another is listen. I think it's probably the most important thing any marketer can do, and it is the way to be the most true to the brand and the consumer.
One of the things that I know you said was that you've really got to be it. You can't just say it. You've got to actually live it and do it. How do you bring that purpose to life throughout the organization so that it goes from being something that you're putting a stake in the ground and saying to actually doing?
I actually think for things that really want to be driven by purpose, it's almost it's a question of knowing who you are and knowing what it is you stand for, building that in the culture of the company, and making sure that everything that you do with the brand, every decision that you make, is consistent with the culture and with the values of the company and the brand that you intend to be. So, I think it really is about being very, very clear and deeply committed to who you are, and being consistent about that in terms of who you hire, who you make as a partner, who you don't hire, who you don't make as a partner, who you say yes to, who you say no to, what you say yes to, what you say no to, and reminding yourself of those core values in every decision that you make. And until it becomes part of your DNA. As one of the founding people at MTV, we sort of grew up knowing kind of what was and what wasn't MTV. There was I think I might have told you this sort of cliche phrase, but you can't say you're cool if you're MTV. You have to just be it, right? You can't say that you are, super knowledgeable about sports if you're ESPN. You just have to be it. If you're working with somebody like Oprah, you can't say we're trustworthy. You can't say we understand women. You just have to do it. You have to be it. You have to represent. I think that the companies that are most successful at having that purpose and imbuing the whole company with a purpose, it then extends out. There's a halo effect that your viewers, your consumers, your customers feel that. They feel that authenticity. They feel the sort of extra added touch that there is, that emotional connection that your employees have, and people want to be part of that.
Yeah, it's so true. I think, the relationship between authenticity and purpose is so interesting. And if you don't have that walking of the walk, it can really blow up. And, the perfect example today that's super relevant is the Ellen show, and not to pick on her, but she's built this incredibly powerful brand based on kindness. And when reports surface that, hey, that may not be reality, That's pretty damaging. I mean, can she recover as a brand when the brand purpose or promise has not been delivered like that?
I would guess that they are in pretty serious crisis communications sort of mode. And, unfortunately, I think at the moment, there's enough kind of chatter in the system on both sides that it makes it more complicated. I think, she's going to have to be extremely humble and extremely sensitive, empathetic, responsive in a very, very significant way to pull that back. Only because I think, if this was the first time that this bubbled up, it would be manageable, and I think it was manageable the first time that it bubbled up. The fact that it is kind of coming back with some velocity at this point just creates a deeper problem. I think she's beloved. I think she and the show is beloved. It's a perfect example, as we just talked about telling the truth and being honest. And if people sniff out that you're not being honest, it has an impact. It has an impact. Again, you can't say you're kind and sort of do kind things out there and then not be a kind person in real life. So, there's a really important piece of integrity that I think, whether or not you're doing something philanthropic, whether you're doing something that is specifically purpose-driven, again, having that set of values and staying true to a set of values, and reinforcing and modeling and expecting a level of authenticity and integrity, I think is critical to the success of any brand, especially a purpose-driven brand.
Yeah. I think what was interesting to me earlier this year in the era of COVID and the pandemic is a lot of brands came out with messages of support at the onset of this time period, early March, kind of moving into April, this we're in it together. And then it kind of evolved and you started to see some getting into what I would call gimmicky with like separating their logo for social distancing and things. It's hard to walk that line when there's such a big everyone needs to respond to. How do you drive authenticity and be authentic but stand out still?
Well, I'll tell you what we did. We're an ed tech platform that has over 40 million pieces of study guide and study support resources for college students, and it was really clear that students were being disrupted in the most massive way, as were educators. And we knew we needed to do something meaningful, and we knew we needed to do it quickly. And we had been looking at the possibility of helping students with emergency aid in the fall. There are many, many, many students who are one flat tire away or one, broken laptop away from having to drop out of school. The typical college student is not really that 4-year sitting on the quad Ivy League type student. The average college student is 26 years old. A huge percentage of students are working 2 or 3 jobs in order to actually be able to afford to go to college. They're supporting families, they're raising kids. So we knew that there were already tremendous stresses on students, and we acted very quickly to say, let's take the emergency aid program we were exploring and let's just launch it. And we went out to our mailing list to about 1.5 million students and said, we're committing $200,000 to this. We're building it right now as we speak. If you need emergency aid in some way, please give us your information, and as soon as this is ready to go, we'll let you know. If you want us to get back in touch with you, tell us your name, your email, your school, and we ask them to answer 4 or 5 questions. What do you need most in terms of aid? And within 48 hours, we had over 17,000 responses. So we could see really quickly that the need was dire, and we more than doubled our commitment. We moved our commitment up to $500,000, and we started working immediately with universities, with sort of organizing organizations for universities, for community college, for the research universities, and we were able through university financial aid organizations to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000 out to over 1,000 students. in a matter of weeks. And what we heard from the university partners was, you got to do this and you got to do this fast, and especially you want to be concerned about like the DACA people and, people that weren't being helped by the federal aid. And the fact that we did this with no other ulterior motive except just to tell our students, like, we get it, we hear what you need, and this is what we're doing for you. We also opened up our library for free questions and answers and textbook solutions to students to get them through finals, et cetera. And then we did the same thing for educators who are facing the same level of challenges. So, we started doing pop-up seminars so educators could share with each other how do they learn how to do assessments online, how do they try and take their coursework online, and we opened up the entire Course Hero library to any verified educator. So we were really, really mindful of not just saying something, but doing something, and then continuing to communicate with educators, continuing to communicate with students, letting them know what we were doing, and really building a sense of listening and continuing to build our commitment. And I think that it has served us well by making a few responsive, unselfish, proactive decisions. I think we were able to demonstrate to both our educators and our students that we're paying attention, that we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk, and that's very much what we intend to continue doing. And particularly where your consumers are being hit, you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, definitely. What a time to be in online education, honestly, and feel like you're having a huge impact. If only all the elementary schools, I'm sure speaking for every parent on the line, had Course Hero as well, we'd be so grateful. One of the things I'm interested in is you've had, this long career in networks, and now you're at Course Hero. What excited you about making that transition? Obviously, it was very timely for the industry, but you jumped ship before that. What kind of led you down this path?
Well, I look at the kinds of people that I worked with at Oprah and at MTV. We were very, at MTV, people were very driven and very passionate about music. At ESPN, people were very passionate about sports. At Oprah, we were very passionate about helping people live their best lives. I actually wrote that line. And it came from not a campaign, not a level of marketing thinking, but out of reflecting on what is it that we're really doing. Again, there's a level of authenticity. It didn't come from trying to maneuver something. It came from listening to our consumers. This was actually Oprah.com, and then it turned into the brand for Oprah. It came out of what we really were hearing from people and what we truly wanted to do. When I think about places where the people in the field are that passionate and that honestly committed and selfish about what they do, education is that way. I have not yet met an educator who isn't first and foremost concerned with helping students. And there's so many ways to be innovative and to bring the creativity that exists in the classroom and that kind of relationship that should exist between students and educators, to try and lift that up and shape it and have it step up in a way that it helps to expand the business and serve our educators and our students. That to me was a really important and purposeful, creative and strategic challenge. And I'm happy to say that I spent a long time getting to know the people at Course Hero, and in terms of the integrity check and the authenticity check, I felt very, very good about that. And I'll say the word that I think is most important in all of this is trust. I really felt like, excuse me, as I got to know the people at Course Hero, I could trust their intentions, and I could trust the kind of partnership that we would have internally and the kind of partnerships that we would collectively try to grow and build with our educators and our students. And I had enough instinct about that to make me say, let's give it a try.
Yeah. It's fun to try new things, obviously. And I was so curious about, kind of what led to that shift. one of the things you pointed me to last week was this video of you speaking a couple years ago, GSV Summit, for those who might want to watch it later. It's excellent. It's also on the topic of purpose-driven marketing. But I love this clip that you showed from it, and it was a clip from Oprah's very first episode, and then a clip from her very last episode. And it was all about brand consistency and consistency of the show and delivering on the purpose over time, and how much similarity there was despite how long this was on the network. How have you balanced brand consistency and purpose-driven consistency with evolving the brand?
Listen, when you have somebody who's as powerful as Oprah is and her instincts are as powerful as they are, you know, I think what we got down to is an exercise literally for every show. As a producer, she would ask each producer, what is your intention with this show? Or with a guest, you know, what is it that you want to communicate with this show? And if she understood the intention, she could expand and elevate that intention. And, you know, when you think about a word like intention married to a word like purpose, again, there's lots of ways that you can help somebody express their purpose if you understand their intention. So we checked our intention all the time. And, you know, we got to a place where there was a shorthand of, you know, what would Oprah do? You know, and we all just sort of had that filter. And I think that's, again, part of going back to what I originally was saying, is building an organization that has character, and the character and integrity of each person is consistent with the character and integrity of leadership and the brand. And if you do that and you are consistent with the way that you are kind of pressure testing everything, everybody starts to share the same DNA in a way, if you will. So, you know, I don't think we even realized until the final show that what she had said in the first show was the same thing that she had said in the last show. And I'll just share with the audience that on the very first Oprah Winfrey show, she really talked about you are not alone. Everybody's story is important. And at the very last show, she actually said the same thing. And I don't think that that was planned. I think that is just what is at the heart of what Oprah has been about. And we all understood that in many, many ways. And this was sort of the proof of the pudding, as opposed to how do I do that? It's like, if you are doing it, it's like if you build it, they will come. If you're doing it, it starts to, I think, expand on itself.
Yeah, a lot of, you know, obviously Oprah is a great example because, you know, not only was she the brand, but obviously she played a big role in it too. But even, you know, on the business side, you know, the Steve Jobs or the Lance Armstrongs that have, you know, kind of been a figurehead of a purpose-driven brand, when they leave, it's interesting to see what happens in that transition, that, you know, this whole company that's rallied around this purpose, yet that transition can kind of shake things a little bit. Have you ever been somewhere when that transition has happened, and how have you sort of navigated that?
Well, I wasn't there, but, you know, I think MTV, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, all of the Viacom brands, especially MTV, kind of went through that. You know, it was a brand built on rebellion. It was a brand built on us versus them. And then Nickelodeon took a page out of the MTV book and said, okay, we're going to do a little us versus them, take it down to the next generation. And, you know, in many ways, both for MTV and for Oprah, I felt like I was a steward of the brand. I was protecting something that was already there and very, very precious, as opposed to building them. They built on their own quite organically. And I think it's the choices that you make. Yes, no, let's push forward on this. Let's not do this. That is how you build a brand, when you already have that magic, you know, sort of that magic in a bottle. When MTV, you know, the bigger and the more corporate Viacom got, I think the more difficult it was for the really creatively driven people to continue to do what they did. There were so many other kinds of considerations, and you know, and the world was changing and evolving in so many ways. And video music wasn't what it was from a ratings point of view. And how did you do lifestyle programming? And you know, how did that turn into, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff? To the point where I think there was a time when MTV kind of lost its way, and it was more of a business than it was a brand. And I think then there were still some of the original MTV people there, but they were already way, 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 way up the corporate ladder and probably not as hands-on creatively. And, I think that there are cycles of that with any brand that has an extended lifespan, where you can lose your way a little bit and you have to pull back, and it takes people who have the real emotional discipline, so to speak, to insist that we got to tighten this up.
Yeah, when you think about, MTV and ESPN and Oprah and now, of course, Hero, is there a consistent theme from your perspective of, how you've been able to be successful from a marketing standpoint across all four of those?
Yeah, I will say the same thing I said a little bit ago. I really think for me, the key things are living and telling the truth. And, and there are some more personal sort of philosophical kinds of lessons that I spoke about in the GSV conference that Oprah shares, that are a little bit more spiritual, that if you know who you are and you believe in what your instincts are telling you and what your life is showing you, if you are a good listener and you're listening not just on an intellectual level, but on a heart kind of level, the guideposts are there for you to live up to who you are, as a company, as a brand, as a leader, as a contributor within a company. So, I think the more you listen, the more you hear. And the more you hear, the more well honed the decisions are that you can make. So, I don't think that there's like a magic thing that I bring. I feel like I've been very lucky to be in environments where there is a natural relationship between a consumer and the brand, and I've been able to listen and hold myself and our teams up to a standard of respect for our viewers, for our consumers, to say they come first. We have to listen to them. And despite the pressures, if there are pressures for revenue or pressures for growth, what the commitment is to the consumer and making sure that you are respectful, relentlessly consistent and respectful of that consumer. I think that is the key to any brand, but especially a brand where you want people to take action and you want people to be connected to your point of view and your purpose in a deeper kind of way.
Yeah, I think, being connected to your consumers is more important than ever. It's always been important, of course, but especially right now, it feels more important than ever. And I'm just curious, are there new ways that you are listening to your consumers during this time period? I mean, you mentioned getting the feedback and kind of understanding what they really matter to them now, but are there different signals that you're looking for?
We've done everything from, anthropological listening to, millions and millions of social posts to try and understand the category and understand our brand and understand where students are, to focus groups, to, quant surveys, to segmentation surveys, and really just getting out there and meeting with educators. For instance, we just did an educator summit 2 weeks ago with about 7,000 people registered, and we did, I think, 90 sessions in 3 days, and we really had a chance to get to know people. And we had dance parties and feedback sessions, cocktails every night. So even though it was virtual, we really had an opportunity to listen to people. And I think that when you take a high touch approach with listening and talking and engaging, you learn things you don't necessarily expect that you're going to learn. We even did a survey with students for the purposes of sharing with educators. What is life like for you in this COVID moment? What is it what's working for you? What's not working for you? What do you want an educator or a teacher to know? What do you want them to do differently? And so we did this with 100 students. Our research team presented that to educators, and there are educators who came up to us after the session and said, I'm going to change my teaching plan for the fall based on what I learned. And again, our intention was positive. Our intention was generous, so to speak, that we listen, if you guys want this survey and you want to do it in your own campus, in your own community, here, here's all the work that we did. Take it and use it for, learn it. You know, it may be different in your community than it was across our student base. So, you know, again, the intention was not to merchandise anything. It was to learn and to share in the most generous way that we could. And I think that's what we want to continue to do. And I think, you know, when you approach anything that way, whether it's a relationship, whether it's, you know, a business thing or a purpose-driven, you know, company sort of thing, if you, Michelle Obama says, you know, you take the high road, you know, it's always the better way to go. If you are generous with what you're putting out there, I think people who are engaged in your brand they tend to be generous coming back to you. People feel that, people recognize that.
Yeah, for sure. I love the virtual nature of taking the feedback and still trying to make it personal and have that connection. 2020 has been a challenging year for many people, many brands, many businesses. And what's been so interesting to me, having started my career in journalism and PR a million years ago now, is that this is like finally the year where you can't be agnostic and you can't say no comment. And it's been super interesting to see companies from all walks of lives, you know, come out and make a statement around Black Lives Matter, whether it was Ben and Jerry's or Wrangler jeans and everyone in between. What advice do you have for purpose-driven brands in this era? They're navigating a lot of things, and some companies historically, even if they have a purpose, maybe wouldn't comment or take a stance, and that is not the 2020 way. I'm curious your thoughts on how to be fast and how to be true to yourself. And
right. Well, you know, listen, I think it's possible to take a stand without being overly provocative, so to speak. You know, we took a stand by saying we want to help students with emergency aid. We want to help students with content. We want to help educators. You know, when everything happened with George Floyd, we took a stand as well and said, okay, we're going to go to our college partners. We had already done a partnership with UNCF, and we called our friends there and said, we'd like to make another donation. Can we come up with something that we can do together specifically to address some of these kinds of issues? And we also reached out and made a partnership with an organization called Code Path, which they specifically reach out to underrepresented schools and underrepresented students at underrepresented schools. They've built their own curriculum for computer skills, programming, etc. Anybody, any underrepresented student on a campus can take those courses for free. They train both teachers and students on those campuses to teach those courses, and then they have follow-up internships, mentorships, career fairs, etc. We made a commitment to CodePath. We're building a partnership with CodePath. We're not making any major political statement except to say we are listening. We are equally concerned about everything that's happening, and we want to not just say Black Lives Matter, we want to do something about it. And, you know, I would say, if I was going to try to be pithy about it, what you do is more important than what you say.
I love going back to that point. I think that's so powerful, and it's so true. We've got some good questions coming in, actually, so I'm going to start switching gears and answering questions from the chat.
Okay.
One of those questions is actually a follow-up to that, really being it and doing it rather than saying it, so perfect segue. How do you guide the conversation with successful brands that have only had a top-down, one-way relationship with customers for most of their existence, to try and be a purpose-driven and try and have that new mindset of being in conversation with customers?
Wow, you know, I mean, that sounds like it's, you know, one of the kinds of things that you have to change as a culture of a company. You know, if a company is mandating things from the top down, I would just wonder if what is it that the leadership is listening to in order to mandate that from the top down? You know, I guess depending on where you are in the organization and depending on, you know, your role, to encourage people or question, you know, what are we getting in from the consumer? What are we understanding? And are we understanding fully what our consumers are telling us? And are we listening to what our consumers are telling us versus what we're telling ourselves? Not
Another
always
question.
easy. If you're not at the top of the company and you're trying to question the people at the top of the company, that's not always easy. But I think that's through the relationships that you have within a company to try and speak to the right people, find a coalition of people who want to listen and reflect that circular kind of communication. Find some allies.
That's right. Allies and advocates.
Right.
Another question from the chat is, what trends in consumer behavior are particularly interesting to you right now, and are changing media consumptions impacting your marketing?
Yes. Boy, it's hard to keep up with all the changing media habits, and particularly for the college student audience. All of our marketing has been very, very, very targeted, very SEO driven, very SEM driven, and we haven't really done a tremendous amount of outbound, broader kind of marketing. So I feel like we're kind of growing from the ground up. We're learning by what we're seeing with SEO, what we're seeing with SEM. We're experimenting with influencer campaigns. We're experimenting with targeting and retargeting. We're experimenting with new platforms. We're building out more ongoing kinds of email programs. And in my sense, at least in our business, is that the more direct ways you can find to communicate and to engage with consumers, the better off you're going to be. Until you reach such a level of scale that you know what you can say. And here's one other thing that I think, even more than kind of marketing from the top down to the last question, if you have a platform, knowing how to use that platform to best serve your audience, viewer, consumer, your platform is the best possible destination you can create. So, if it's your digital website for retail stores or, for consumer packaged goods, everything you do is a marketing tool. And I think, people have more powerful platforms necessarily than they think. And you think you need to use all kinds of external tools, and you don't sort of see the value and the importance of the most core tools that you have.
Got a couple questions here that are a little bit more about your personal story and your background. And this is actually a really great one. I love this one, is how has your leadership style changed over the past few months or even in recent years? And have you been able to develop more personal relationships with customers or colleagues as a result?
Boy, I will say I've been fortunate to work in companies where, and I have to say, it sort of ties into this. I have always been able to be myself. I have never really felt like there was a disconnect between who I am and the place in which I work. So, my leadership style has grown by virtue of, hopefully growing and maturing as I've gone through my career and improving my listening skills. And I think I listen more now than I did probably when I was, in my 20s. And there's another sort of aphorism that I've heard for many years. It's not even necessarily about what you do, it's about who you are. And I think that with the more experience you have and the less you feel you have to prove, the more you actually are able to prove by being something that people respond to, not necessarily saying, I did this, I did this, I did this. Oprah tells a story about Maya Angelou when she opened up her school in South Africa, and she said, this is what my legacy is going to be. And Dr. Angelou said to her, you don't know what your legacy is. You don't know how many people you've impacted, where you've impacted them, how you've impacted them. You have no idea what legacy really is. And I think to the degree that I've kind of internalized that as a leadership style, you never know who you're helping, who you're hurting potentially. If you start to think a little bit less about what you do and a little bit more about who you are and how you are helping other people, and listening for those kinds of cues and listening for the same kind of cues with your consumer, I think that is, for me, that has been what I hope to evolve to as a leader.
Yeah, I love that. and the spot on like being able to listen too, with age. I would agree, it helps. But my mentor used to say to me since I was really young that 2 ears, one mouth, and for a reason, and try and listen twice as much as you speak. And it's easier said than done at times. Okay, very last one. I know we've just got a couple minutes left. Someone has asked around purpose-driven marketing, knowing your purpose as an individual and how that interplay can be interesting. How did you get into marketing, and did your personal purpose play a role in that?
I will have to say, I don't necessarily know that I had a personal purpose that I had identified. Excuse me, I was a film major and I loved movies. And the very first job that I had before, in MTV as a company was like being a marketing coordinator for the movie channel. And I was just willing to do anything I could do to be involved in movies. And in fact, when MTV came along, which was very soon after I joined the company, they said, oh, we're going to combine music and television. And, we think it's going to be great. And I was like, that's never going to work. Therefore, you never know. But I think I did always listen to my instinct. There's a story that I tell at the GSV conference about Oprah when she was 4 years old and her grandmother was putting clothes on the laundry line, and she was saying, Oprah Gail, you better pay attention. You better learn how to do this because someday you're going to work with some nice white people. And at 4 years old, she said, nope, no, Grandma, I'm not going to be doing that. And she knew something. Her purpose was a higher calling, and I think I just sort of always knew I wanted to do something big. I wanted to do something that had a lot of impact, and I was lucky to be able to find places where my instinct and what was happening matched. So there's a degree to which I think it's, again, just paying attention to what lights you up and following your instinct.
That's great. I see we've got to go back.
Hi, Kyla.
Hi guys, great discussion. I actually really love the language all throughout this conversation, and I wrote a bunch of them down. It was, honesty, authenticity, integrity, being generous, unselfish, being true to your values, check your intentions. I thought was a great one as well too, and the importance of listening. So I think, Harriet, you sort of started off the session today with the point about you can't just say it, you have to be it. And I think that what you do is more important than what you say. Like, lots of great language and advice all throughout. And I think all great advice for purpose driven brands, but really it's great advice for any brand. They're kind of the foundation of being a successful brand and being authentic. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights, and it was a really powerful and great discussion. So thank you.
Excellent. Good. My pleasure. We'll see you.
Thanks, Dalton. Great. So we are going to our next session. Just a quick reminder to the audience as well, too, just to use the hashtag